We couldn't get enough equipment there at the time.
We went up and tried to do a sound check, and we just literally couldn't find enough functioning gear that we felt that was going to, you know, that Morbid Angel was going to be able to do the show that we wanted to do for the fans.
And it was right down to the Unleashed was playing, and we're still trying to get equipment there. And when it came time for us to play, we couldn't get the equipment for the guys to play, so they had to cancel the gig. And it was a pretty sad day on the tour. I mean, I remember the guys. I remember thinking to myself as I'm watching the kind of atmosphere deteriorate on the tour that this may be the end of the tour for the guys. I mean, they were that devastated.
Everyone was really upset about it. You know, they weren't any more upset than we were about it. We were as upset as anyone else could be, but, you know, that's the breaks. If I could take anything back, it would be, you know, not to be on that highway at that time, at that point in my life. But, you know, things happen, and you know, it sucks, but that's one of the worst experiences that I've ever had with this band.
You know, there were a lot of arguments going on with the tour manager at the time. That later escalated into some physical fights, but it was a bad time for the tour. It really was. I remember calling home going, I think I'm coming home.
We're sitting in Stockholm kind of like on a delay. Our next shows are 2 shows in Paris.
We were scrambling to get the equipment back, and we didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but they knew they had to get, you know, what we could compile, all the equipment we could get together. We had to get that to Paris.
We found this guy named Sven, this big Viking dude who had this big truck with these horns and a battering ram on the front of the truck. And he's like, no problem, I'll take you to Paris, no problem. The dude hops in the truck with Graham Crasher. We get all the gear from where Graham crashed the fucking truck.
But they didn't want him to go alone, so they picked me and T-Bone to go with him. So we had to sit in the cab with this guy who just rolled the truck. So we drove for 36 hours to get to Paris. And so the whole trip, Tony and I were sitting there watching him, making sure he wouldn't fall asleep. And we're just talking, you okay, man? You okay? You okay? For about 30 hours. It was a pretty harrowing experience. I remember writing in my journal that this could be the last page I'll ever write.
Oh, those guys were the worst, just the worst. I remember we were doing dates, these Christmas festivals, with it was Motorhead, Wolfsbane, Schmear, he had some band going on, Morbid, Sepultura, Creator, and Motorhead. And we roll up 10 minutes before we were supposed to be on stage. It was so bad, and it was really shitty, and everyone knew like we were in a pretty screwed predicament. But pulled it off, got out of there, never used those people again. And if you ever hear of Ira the driver or Graham Crasher, run quickly. Quickly.
Some of the fighting that had gone on with the tour manager and between the tour manager and the band and the crew, and, you know, kind of boiled up with that incident in Sweden that night. And the tour manager did and said some things to the band that we were never ever really able to get past, and I kind of held a grudge against the tour manager, and we didn't have a very good relationship the entire tour after that.
We're on this Motorhead tour in Europe, and our guitar tech, Eric Partlow, the whole thing with the truck drivers and stuff, we kind of had a breakdown with our tour manager.
And there were several nights that, you know, we almost came to blows because of it, and finally we were in Hanover, Germany, towards the end of the tour when we were on a big festival with Motorhead and some other bands. And I guess during the backstage activities, it kind of boiled over.
Tim was talking shit about the crew and the band on this festival in Hanover at this place called the Music Hall, which used to be a submarine factory.
I couldn't hold back any longer, and me and the tour manager got in a pretty big fight.
Tim was saying something, and Eric looked at him and said, dude, you couldn't tour manage your ass to a toilet seat, right? And Tim was a smaller guy. Tim went out and just punched Eric in the face, and Eric's like, oh, you didn't fucking just do that. And fucking Eric just beat the shit out of him through a plate glass window in the production office.
And ended up breaking some chairs and throwing them through a window and cutting my hand. I still have the scar here to remind me of the incident back in Hanover. and this was right in the middle of the main common area backstage.
And I just remember Merch, one of the guitar techs from Motorhead, Deptford John, brings him out by me, and his hands are all just bloodied up, and he was like, "I got the little fucking bastard."
But I was able to get my revenge for me and the rest of the band on him, and I ended up getting kicked off the tour, the festival tour, and had to go spend a couple of days in a small hotel room in Germany somewhere. And I remember being able to reach from one wall to the other, thinking this is the smallest room ever.
There was a place in Houston, Texas called the Vatican, a club called the Vatican. And the Morbid guys played. The place was sold out, packed. And there was a stabbing at the show. The fight broke out and this guy got stabbed. And had to go to the hospital, all ripped open. So we played there, still on the Blessed Cycle, about 9 months later. All of a sudden this guy comes up to all of us after the show and goes, "Dudes, you remember me? I'm the guy that got stabbed at the show," and showed us his scar, and he had this huge scar. And it was like, right on, dude, way to go.
In Blessed Are the Sick was the first time that we went to Australia.
We had Gunter, the band's manager, doing sound for us.
Our manager, not our sound man, but our manager actually flew down with us, and he was running sound.
Did a good job. He just is a little deaf. To the point where we were in Brisbane, I believe it was, and we were playing this place that's kind of in the train station, and it was this glass wall, glass doors, and the thing was rattling. He's chasing people out of the room.
And this place was a big place by a train station, and it was so freaking loud in there that it like started this riot, and people just trashed the place. I mean, by the time we were done playing, there wasn't a seat left in the place. The whole place looked like a bomb went off in it. Beck, in the beginning days of the band, back before there were magazines that, any of the larger magazines wouldn't touch anything like this. We all were tape traders, and it was tape trading, word of mouth, fanzines, what have you. And we got this amazing response from South America, in particular Brazil, where we were actually friends with Sepultura, Sarcophago, several other bands down there. So actually with Blessed Are the Sick, we was the first time we were actually able to go down and do a tour in Brazil. Absolute mayhem. I mean, I couldn't believe how amazing the South American fans were. Just incredible. Warm, genuine, just this whole culmination, like on 10 the whole time. That was an amazing tour. We made a lot of friends. Had just a wonderful time. Great food. We actually had several days off, and so we were able to get out and see the country and meet a lot of people. I picked up this tattoo while I was down there. A couple of shows where the Army was actually the security for the show, big outdoor shows. And then we also played some small club type shows, very personal shows that were just so jammed. I mean, it's like this. We were like this on stage and still pulled it off. It's a wonderful time. Wonderful experience.
I remember walking away from that tour thinking, that was probably the biggest thing I took away from it, is what great fans. I mean, there were certainly some fans that, scared me to think that, they weren't so bad, but the thought that they might reproduce kind of scared me. But for the most part, I was, it was remarkable the effect that the fans had on me. They were great.
Fans are amazing. We come in, there's a fire, and we just pour more gas on it, and hey, let's just burn this son of a bitch up. You know what I mean?
Some of those shows, some of the early shows, some of the shows on Blessed, like the Marquee in New York. I mean, you just sit there and you think back on what some of those shows were, and just how tight, how over the top, how brutal the band was, how uncompromising they were, how just on the forefront of something. I mean, everything they did, everything that came